Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Oh my goodness, that session with Stuart Pearce. If you weren't moved and evolved and had your mind expanded, I don't know what's going to do that for you. We have our next incredible speaker. So let me just give you a little snippet of their biography. So we have next Dr. Theresa Bullard. Dr. Theresa is the host of Mystery Teachings on Gaia TV, a PhD physicist, and a teacher at the Modern Mystery School. She expertly bridges science and spirituality with practical methods for helping us tap into our innate human potential. And today we are going to be looking at a deeper universal truth. So exploring who we are and our spiritual connection with the universe, and also coming at this from a subatomic to the cosmic, to the multidimensional beings we are and the vast potential that we have. But we need a way to gain access into that realm, and that is what today's session is all about. So Dr. Theresa is going to weave together ancient metaphysical wisdom, bridging science and spirit, and in this workshop you will discover the secret to establishing a quantum coherent state, unlock your greater potential, and look at how to manifest the life that you desire. So please give Dr. Theresa a very warm in-person and virtual welcome.
Okay, thank you. Everyone can hear okay? Yes? So bridging science and spirituality is one of my favorite topics. So you're going to get a little bit of a different flavor, but some similar points, some similar keys as what we just heard Stuart talking about. Now, this is about our subatomic, sorry, that's my title slide right there. So unlocking our quantum potential. Now, from the subatomic, from the very quantum core essence of who we are and what we're made of, to the cosmic, right? We extend beyond and between all of these levels because we are truly multidimensional beings of vast potential. But the question is, how do we access that? How do we tap into that? How can we really awaken all of this potential that's within us? And the keys, I believe, are revealed within quantum physics. And yet I believe that you'll also find that those keys that quantum physics can reveal to us about the core essence of who we are dovetail and reflect or correspond with many of the keys that you could find in other fields as well, which points to their universality. Right? Now we're going to explore what are those quantum principles. Quantum physics is something that people talk about and maybe throw around a lot in the new age today, and also people talk about it in our science and our technology today, but what does it really mean? And in addition to some of these core quantum principles and what they are, I want to explore a little bit about vibration, resonance, and coherence in particular. Now, coherence is a major key when it comes to accessing that quantum potential. But what is it? What is coherence? So we are vibrational beings, and there are many, many different vibrations. So if we look at, for example, here we have lots of different frequencies, lots of different phases or rates of vibration happening, and they're, typically out of phase, dissonant with each other. Coherence is when we come and they're all at the same frequency, they're all in phase with each other, synchronized with each other, they are moving in a focused way together in the same direction, like a laser, right? Coherent means laser-like. And so when it comes to quantum physics, for example, to excite an electron or to create a quantum event, we usually need to use lasers physically. And so that precise amount of energy needs to come in, a coherent amount of energy needs to come in. Now, when we want to extend this to the metaphysical as well, how can we bring ourselves into that coherence? How can we become so finely tuned in our ability to create a precise amount of energy? That is the key. So I'm going to explore a couple of different ways in which we establish this coherence within ourselves, within our bodies. And I want to also give you an experience, just give you little simple practical techniques that you can use to create these coherent states within. So the first is brainwave coherence, brain entrainment. How many of you have been exposed to the brainwaves and the coherent state that we can create within our brainwaves? Okay, so how many of you, this is a little new to you? What do I mean by brainwaves? Okay, so brainwaves are going to be about the synchronization. So in your brain, you have these neurons, and those neurons can oscillate, right? They can vibrate. And when you get many neurons vibrating or oscillating together in a synchronized way, then you start shifting from, just scatterbrain mind to having balance, right? First, we start with balancing between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, balancing between your logical mind and your intuitive mind or your creative side, balancing between your thinking functions and your feeling functions. So we want to create that balance. But not only can you create balance between left and right hemispheres, you can also create this synchronization from the front to the back and from the higher parts of the cortex down into the old brain, into the brain stem. And so there's multiple frequencies that your brain waves can oscillate at, that the neural synchronizations can oscillate at. They talk about everywhere from gamma rates, which is like 35 up to about 100 hertz or beats per second as those neural oscillations go. And then they can come down to beta. Beta's how we tend to operate through our day, right? We're waking, we're exercising, we're studying, we're very focused on the outer world. Beta's between about 30 to 13 or 15 hertz. Alpha is when you start really getting into a lighter kind of flow state. You're maybe doing yoga, light meditation, a guided imagery. You're relaxing. You're in the shower. These sort of relaxation response in the body, and that's about 7 to 13 beats per second or hertz. And then as you get even into deeper states of meditation or deeper states of like you're just starting to fall asleep, you go into what's called a theta range, and that theta range is a very powerful healing state. It's about 3 to 8 hertz, or 3 to 7 hertz, and this is where your body can go into a natural, what they call the trophotropic healing state. Now, this talk is not so much about brainwaves, but I wanted to just give you a little bit of that experience. And then there's the delta, which is the slowest frequencies, deep, dreamless, slow sleep. And we want to be able to, you have multiple frequencies going on in your brain all at once, but we want to bring it into coherence, right? So let me just, instead of explaining it all, let me just give you an experience, if you will. So I'm going to invite you to just, for a few minutes, you're going to take a position. If you're experienced with meditation, and you feel that you are easy in getting into meditative state or a quiet mind state, you can have your feet uncrossed, you can have your hands open on your lap, and do your meditation position, spine straight. If you're somebody who feels you're not so experienced with the meditation, or you have a really active mind, there is a physical position you could take called the whole brain state. It's actually the opposite, where you're closing off. So you cross your feet, you'd cross your hands, you would invert it and bring your hands up to your heart here. So you could take that position and just take a few deep breaths in that position as well, and that automatically starts the communication between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. But if you're good with meditative state and getting into that quiet mind, go ahead and just take that open position. And then take a few deep breaths in, right? Breathe in through the nose, and breathe out through the mouth. And as you're breathing in, imagine light coming in from above, down through the crown at the top of the head, and let it fill your body. And you can go ahead and take your right finger on your index finger, and tap your third eye a few times. As you breathe, just tap your third eye, just stimulating that point of focus. And now I'm actually going to invite you to open your eyes, and you're going to look up at your third eye. So imagine that you're looking with your eyes up at that point, right at the center of your forehead. Continuing to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Drawing in the light from above. Allow that breath and that energy to circulate around the brain as you breathe in. Let it stimulate your pineal, pituitary, hypothalamus, the glands at the very, very center of your brain. We're going to take this one step further. And as you're looking at your third eye, with your eyes open, you're going to also imagine that about 45 degrees up from your third eye, that there is like a star, a point of light, a bright shining star. And as you breathe in, you're going to draw that light straight in. Imagine that you're breathing in through the third eye, drawing in the light from that star. And as you exhale, you draw that light through your central core. And let it flow out, both from the top, out from the crown like a waterfall, as well as out through the bottom. Let it cascade around you like a waterfall of light with each breath. And as you do this, you're flowing that light from the center of your being out into the energy field around you, connecting from the inner to the outer. And the more you do this, just notice the sensations in your brain. Notice how you feel. And already it starts to create a state of relaxation. You can close your eyes if you like, and just rest in that for a moment. And when you're ready, just open your eyes. So this is just a brief exercise, eyes open even, where you can start to harmonize the brain and stimulate the central core of the brain, which is your pineal, pituitary, and hypothalamus glands. Now we want to sink this deeper because there's also the neurons, there's what we call the brain within your heart. Your heart is actually considered to be another brain center. They're maybe even more primary, more important than the brain and the head. And there's, thousands, tens of thousands of neurons and glial cells that make up the heart. So the heart is not just an organ that pumps the blood. The heart has its own nervous system. And when we want to work with the heart, and there's, the Egyptians talked about the wisdom of the heart, the knowingness of the heart. And so there is this wisdom that's more intuitive than the thoughts of the brain, for example. So as we sink into the heart, we sink into this place of this innate wisdom, this intuitive connection that is from deeper within, even more intuitive than the right hemisphere, for example, of the brain, which is very creative. But the wisdom of the heart is what we want to sink into next. So when it comes to the heart rate variability, how many of you have heard of some of the work of the Heart Math Institute and heart rate variability? Great. So heart rate variability is, the difference in the heart rate. It goes through this sort of variation of its rhythm. And we can, usually it's, a little stochastic or not so regular, but we can bring it into, again, coherence. So when we bring it into more regularity, it is more coherent. And the keys that the Heart Math Institute has discovered for bringing that, and they've measured it, right? So they've scientifically measured that when we can be in these states of gratitude, states of love, states of joy, that is when the heart rate variability comes into a coherent state. And you synchronize from the heart with the breath, and then it also synchronizes the rhythms of the brain, because the heart actually sends more signals to the brain than the brain does to the heart. So by coming into that heart state, you can create a much nicer whole brain state, and the state of joy, the state of beauty, the state of gratitude and openness to life, that seeing life from that childlike state of being. So we're going to just do a little exercise here to now sink into that heart rate coherence. So give yourself a moment again. So I invite you to just close your eyes, breathing in and out, but this time you're going to breathe as if you're breathing straight through the heart, drawing the breath in. And then as you breathe out, imagine that that breath is flowing out through the heart as well. And if it helps you, you can even place your right hand on your heart, breathing in and out through the heart. And this time, as you draw energy in, connect to that vibration of love. And here, just connect to divine love, the essence of love, the force of creation that is love. Not an emotion, but a state of being, an energy that flows through us and is available to us at any time. And connect again to that star that we talked about, that's at that 45-degree angle above you. And draw that essence of love in from that star straight into your heart. And then as you breathe out, think of somebody that you love. And as you breathe out, send that energy of love to them. And with the next breath, bring in gratitude. Draw in the energy of gratitude. And as you breathe out, send that energy out to somebody that you're grateful for. Imagine their face. Notice how it feels. And of course, you could continue this practice as long as you like. And the more you do this, the more it brings you into that coherent state within the heart. But we're going to continue moving on. So when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And we're going to sink even deeper into our being. And there is also a brain within the gut, and we can achieve coherence within the gut. Now, science and medicine today are starting to discover how important the microbiome is, for example, within the gut. But also, there is neurons within the gut. There is what is called the enteric nervous system within your gut. And there's 100 million nerve cells just within the linings of the digestive tract and within the gut. And these, again, these neurons within the gut connect up through the vagus nerve. They connect up to the heart, they connect up to the brain, and they send far more signals up to the brain than the brain sends down to the gut. So your gut also connects directly into your limbic system, which is your emotional centers within the brain. And it connects into parts of the back of the brain, the old brain. So when we talk about moods and mental health issues, depression, anxiety, things like this, often this is controlled more by what's going on within your gut than what's going on, within the brain. Most of the serotonin in your body is produced within the gut. And so we can just bring coherence into the gut, and it will help with this balancing out of the mood, the emotions, and so forth. Memory, intuitive, right? That gut instinct, gut feelings. So again, your intuitive centers are deeper in the body, and they will send us signals, which then our brain is just meant to become aware of, right? To become conscious of. So let's just do a quick exercise here that helps you with coherence in the gut. And this has everything to do with the breath, right? We talked about and heard about the breath of life before. So the breath here specifically, when it comes to breathing into the gut, is that deep belly breathing where you breathe in and your belly expands. You feel that expansion in the belly. And as you breathe out, it contracts, but you want to extend the out breath. So when you extend the out breath, you're stimulating that vagus nerve, which controls the parasympathetic nervous system, which releases stress, which helps to bring you into a more relaxed and coherent state. So try just taking a few deep breaths. If you can slow your breathing down to a rate of about 5 to 7 breaths per minute, if you're not sure what that is, maybe breathe into a count of 5, hold your breath for a few seconds, and then breathe out to a count of 10, or extend the out breath for as long as you can before you then breathe in again. And that extending of the out breath is what will really stimulate that coherent state within the gut and the vagus nerve. So take a few deep breaths in through the nose, deep into the belly, deep belly breathing. As you breathe in, it expands. As you breathe out, it contracts. And then extend the out breath. And again, as you're breathing in, you want to draw in the energy of life essence, life force energy into your belly. And again, connect to that star at that 45-degree angle above you. Draw in the energy from that point. Now the vagus nerve that connects from the gut up to the heart, up to the brain, it begins at the base of the spine, the bottom of the spine, and it goes all the way up into the brain. And that word vagus nerve means wandering. So it's this nerve that wanders through that central kind of axis, almost like the two serpents that wind their way up the staff of the caduceus. And the 90% of the information is flowing upstream, from the bottom up to the brain. Only 10% of it is flowing down from the brain to the lower parts. So the gut and the heart are far more in charge than the brain. And yet we've forgotten this in our modern society. So you can, if you like, to now synchronize between these centers. You can place the left hand on the hara, you can place the right hand on the heart, and do that deep belly breathing. Breathing in to the belly as it expands, breathing out as the belly contracts, and extending that out breath. And then also connecting to those feelings of love, compassion, gratitude, empathy. The other thing that really stimulates the vagus nerve is your voice. chanting, singing, toning. So very much like we experienced before, if on the out-breath, if you would like to make a sound or chant Om or something along those lines, we can do that. So breathing in, and as you breathe out, just allow that sigh or that sound to come out. And to raise that energy up, you can also, again, open your eyes and look up at your third eye. We want to ascend this energy. So this is modern science discovering things that ancient wisdom has known about for many, many millennia. Because in the Taoist system, in Qi, right, there are 3 primary Qi centers. They call the 3 Dantians. And these 3 centers coincide with the brain, the heart, and the hara, or the gut, which is here just below the hara, below the navel. So all 3 are important, and these are energy centers. Now, the Dantian means the sea of Qi, or the elixir field, or simply energy centers. And these energy centers are the key areas of focus for bringing coherence within the body. Now, when we also connect to the Kabbalistic system, the ancient Western mystical tradition of Kabbalah, we can overlay the tree of life onto these same 3 centers, and they align with what we call the middle pillar in the Kabbalistic system. Now, the middle pillar relates to centers of will, right? The spirit's will in the brain or the third eye. The heart is the soul's will. The hara is the personal will. And then we also have the root, or the bottom of the tree of life, which is more like your body's will. And so these middle pillar, these energy centers are really vital when it comes to harnessing, focusing, directing our will, which affects things in the quantum field. Now, I'm building things up here because I want you to really come to understand how it is that we harness the quantum realm. So we can relate these states on the middle pillar, these 3 energy centers, to different levels of consciousness. You have within your mind your ability to focus, intent, intention. You have within your heart, you have love, compassion, empathy, altruism, right? And those states of consciousness. And you have within your gut, you have that gut instinct. You have that the feelings, the knowingness, the life force energy that you direct towards those things that you desire. And then what is it that we contain within our root? What is our root within our body besides the chakra? What part of the body is there? Reproductive organs, yeah. And so what is contained within those reproductive organs? The seed of life, thank you. And within our seed of life, we have the DNA that we pass on to future generations. So the DNA is another center that is a place where we can also establish coherence. And DNA coherence comes through many different aspects to it. On one hand, there's what we call the epigenetics, which if you look at any of the work of Bruce Lipton or Dawson Church, you will find how they have talked about epigenetics and bringing from the mind, you know, our thoughts, our emotions, all of these things affect the expression, the switches of our DNA that turn the codes on and off. They're layers above the genes themselves. And they've also shown with the HeartMath Institute how when we express that heart coherent state of gratitude, of love, of joy, that our DNA actually relaxes its coil. You know how it winds itself up, it has the double helix, but then it also winds itself up around these histones and so forth. it opens up and expands. The DNA literally expands, and it allows more of its genetic expression to be available and accessible when we are in a positive state of being. Contrary, if we go into a state of stress, of anxiety, of negativity, of depression, the DNA tightens up and it reduces the amount of genetic expression that's potentially there. Now, there's another place where coherent energy comes into the DNA, and that's something called the biophoton field. Now, the biophotons are coherent light that literally the DNA emits, right? So the DNA emits this coherent light, like a laser-like light of a very particular frequency, low intensity. So you may not see it, but it is there within the visible spectrum, but it's low intensity. So it's usually below our detector's abilities to see it, but it has been imaged, right? With photosensitive plates and photomultiplier tubes, they have been able to detect this. So your DNA literally puts out coherent light. So it emits it or transmits it, but it also receives coherent light. So this is where things like LED therapy that's being used today for skin treatments and all manner of things. This LED is coherent light, and working with laser light healing, low power like laser pointer. You don't want to use a big high power laser, but low power laser pointers can also be used and sent in maybe through a crystal or something to bring communication into your DNA. So we can use coherent light to communicate with the DNA. And the DNA, they believe, so Dr. Fritz Popp, who's a biophysicist in Germany, was the one who led a group that discovered these biophotons to begin with. And they believe that this light, this coherent light that the DNA emits, these biophotons, is like a network, a biological network, where the DNA all communicates to each other at the speed of light through the biophoton field. Now, in addition to this, there's some pretty fascinating work. So that's the biophotons. There's some pretty fascinating work where the DNA also starts to connect into the quantum field, the quantum vacuum. And this was done by a Russian scientist, Peter Garyev, who basically he was shining a low power laser through a vacuum. And as he shined that through the vacuum, normally it's just going to go straight through, and there might be a little bit of scatter of light. And when you turn that laser off, there's just a few photons kind of bouncing around at random afterwards. And they looked at the scatter pattern. But then he took a strand of DNA, right? And he put that DNA inside that vacuum, and then he shined that laser through it. And what they discovered was that the DNA literally organized the light as it was going through. So the light started to take on the same shape as the DNA spiral through the vacuum. Now, what was even more fascinating was that they then, without opening the vacuum, they removed the DNA, and then they shined the light through it again, and they discovered, to their surprise, that the light still organized itself around the DNA that had previously been in there. They called this the phantom DNA effect. So that DNA basically interacted with the quantum field. Oops, sorry. I talk with my hands. That DNA literally organized the information within the quantum field. And then so long as the vacuum chamber was not disturbed, it continued to hold that information within the quantum field, even when the DNA was removed from the vacuum chamber. So that's pretty amazing. So this is telling us that our DNA communicates with the quantum field. And we can also communicate with our DNA through words, through the right frequencies and sounds, and through our thoughts. And when we bring it into a coherent state, when we bring our words, our thoughts, and the energy that we are bringing in, when we bring ourselves into that coherent state, we are communicating this coherence to our DNA. It relaxes, it opens up, and that communicates to the quantum field. So this, again, this coherent state is what is really important. Yes, we can have our intentions. You know, a lot of people out there today are saying, well, the quantum field is how the law of attraction works, or how, you know, intentions work. Yes, but there's more to it than that. Coherence is key. And it needs to be a whole being coherence. So coherence within the brain, coherence within the heart, coherence within the gut, communicating that to the DNA, bringing that coherence into your DNA, and then that communicates into the quantum field. Now, if you have interest in learning more about the DNA and its science and how it interacts with the quantum field, I do have a whole episode dedicated to it. It's a whole other talk that I do in my Mystery Teaching series, and it's episode 2 of season 2. So just go check out that episode. All of season 2, all of it's great, but all of season 2 really gets into our human potential, whether it's the brain, the DNA, the heart, it gets into all of it. But let's go beyond this now. Let's go into the quantum coherent state and what that means, because quantum nature is at the very core of who we are. We are quantum beings. And even while scientists are like, yeah, but the quantum relates to the very, very, very small, the subatomic realm. But they're starting to discover more and more and more macroscopic objects that behave in a quantum way. And we are made of atoms. We are made of subatomic particles. This is what our essence is. So we can't separate ourselves from the quantum. We are a part of that quantum field. Now, because this is the foundation of who and what we are, the foundation, the core, we can start at that foundation and create coherence at that foundational level, and then build up from there to create that coherence within our whole being. So rather than working from the top down, which we just did, we can work from the bottom up. We can work from that core essence of who and what we are, and then bring it up into these higher states of coherence. So let's go further than brain coherence, further than heart coherence, further than even the gut and the DNA and all of these states, and let's go straight into that quantum coherence, what I like to call becoming quantum conscious. So this has to do with quantum itself and what the word quantum really means, and the core principles that lie at that foundation of quantum physics. Now, quantum physics has been shown to be the most successful physics theory to date. It's not the be-all, end-all. The scientists are still working and searching for their grand unified theory of everything. But they know that whatever that theory of everything, that grand unified field is going to be, it's going to have to incorporate quantum physics, because all of our technologies of today, our cell phones, our computers, our, you know, AI, all of it, it's being built upon quantum principles. But what we need to do is now really come to understand, how can these quantum principles inform our way of life, inform our worldview of who we are, of how things work, and shift out of that old Newtonian classical way of looking at the world. So there's 2 key principles when it comes to quantum physics. And yes, there's lots of phenomenon, but we can distill it down to 2 key principles. And the first is what we would call complementarity. Now I'm going to break this down just so that you'll understand it. You won't need to understand any math. So just, you know, we're going to distill it down to its essence. But first I'll tell you the other key, which is consciousness, right? So you can distill everything of quantum physics down to complementarity and consciousness. Now, many of the scientists who are more going to take a materialist approach, they want to take consciousness out of the equation, right? They want to make it just about the physical. But then there is a whole camp of scientists who, when they follow all the way to the natural conclusions, and they suspend their biases about whether there is or isn't consciousness or spirit, they suspend the bias and they just follow the trail and the logic, it will come to this point where they have to accept that consciousness is universal and primary, that everything has consciousness within it, and it is more fundamental even than physics or the physical realm. But all of the physical realm can be contained within this quantum principle of complementarity. So basically, what does complementarity mean? it was interesting. So Niels Bohr was one of the founders of quantum physics, and he felt that complementarity was at the core essence of quantum physics, and that it was a universal principle, that you can find complementarity in many different aspects of life and the universe and even our own bodies and how we work, how things operate. So what it is basically that there are complementary pairs of properties within any object that you cannot simultaneously observe. So I'll repeat that. So there are pairs of properties that are complementary to each other that you cannot simultaneously observe. So in quantum physics, the way they first discovered this is the famous double slit experiment, where you have, is it light, is it a wave, or is it a particle, right? So they set up their double slit experiment to see if light going through it is particles, and indeed they see it's particles. And then they say, well, what if it's a wave? Because we know that light behaves optically, it behaves like waves. So then they set up their double slit experiment to see, is it a wave? And they have to change the parameters of how they're setting up their experiment to test whether it's a particle or wave. But however they set up their experiment, they realize, yes, it's a particle, yes, it's a wave. How can it be both? Right? So this is where we changed. Not only is light both particle and wave, but electrons, which we normally think of as particles, can also be seen as waves. So they discovered this wave-particle duality, that everything can be both particle and wave, but we can only observe one or the other, depending on how we set up our experiment, depending on the context that we give it. So this is an example of a complementary properties. It has the property of being a particle, it has a property of being a wave. Something that we can all maybe relate to a little bit more is the property of your breath, your breathing. You can breathe in and you can feel some expansion in your body as you do that. And you can breathe out and you can feel contraction in your body as you do that. Try breathing in and out at the same time. Can you do it? Yes. Well, but there's still a cycle going on, right? So they're complementary, and they're happening all the time. Expansion and contraction are complementary. They're the machine of the universe and how things are created. The in-breath, the out-breath, your sympathetic nervous system, which puts you in that fight-flight, and your parasympathetic nervous system that puts you in relaxation. These are complementary modes, but you only have one system firing at a time, not both. So in physics, they had the wave-particle duality, and then they also had something called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which says that there's complementary pairs that you can't know both of them to exact precision. So for example, you have the position and the momentum. You can know exactly where a particle is, but you can't know how fast it's moving exactly. Or you can know exactly how fast it's moving, but you won't know exactly where it is. So there's this uncertainty that comes in. Now, classical physics would say you should be able to know both exactly, but quantum physics says, no, there's uncertainty there. And so you don't know exactly. Also, time and energy. You can know exactly when something happens, but you can't know the exact amount of energy contained within that event at the same time. Or you can measure the exact amount of energy, but you can't know exactly when it happened. So there's this uncertainty that happens in the quantum realm. And within that uncertainty, there's infinite possibility. There are many possible answers to what that property could be. And this is because of the wave-like nature. So these complementary pairs happen, and within that complementarity, you have the uncertainty principle, you have the context, meaning how you choose to set up and observe your state of being. You have simultaneous possibilities and probabilities. You have connectedness, right? Because these complementary pairs are entangled in a way, they're connected to each other. And so all of the other properties and phenomena that happen within quantum physics are captured physically within this property of complementarity, this principle. So let's look again at this other key though, consciousness, right? So consciousness is something that sits beyond the physical. It is metaphysical, right? So it's beyond or above the physical. And maybe this is why scientists, as much as they might try, they can't pinpoint exactly where consciousness is, because it's not a physical phenomenon. It is a metaphysical phenomenon. It is beyond. And so, but in quantum physics, one of the main principles of it is something called the observer effect, that whenever we observe the particle and its state of being, that is when it actually manifests into that state of being. Prior to that point of observation, prior to taking an exact measurement, it could be in many possible states of being, infinite possibilities there in the quantum field. So the observer effect is that a conscious and aware being needs to become aware of that state, of that particle, or whatever it is that we're experimenting on. And until a conscious and aware being becomes aware of that measurement, it's in a quantum superposition. It's in a quantum infinite possibility kind of state of being. So consciousness is the key that relates to this observer effect. And what it has to do with is our choices, right? The conscious observer chooses how they're going to observe a certain state of being. They have their biases, maybe. They have their assumptions. And based on those filters, they then set up their perception. They set up their experiment according to those assumptions. And then that determines what they're going to get out of it. So our choices really matter when it comes to this observer effect and this key of consciousness. But what I would say is that consciousness is more primary here. Consciousness is what initiates a manifestation out of that quantum field. And this comes to then ancient metaphysics again. So for example, in the Western mystery tradition of Hermetic teachings, they talk about, we have the observer effect, the 7 Hermetic Principles. And in the 7 Hermetic Principles, the very first principle is what they call the principle of mentalism. It says the all is mind, the universe is mental, and that everything that comes to be created within our universe starts within the mind of the all as an idea that is then set in motion through the 7 principles to ultimately be generated or manifested. So those 7 principles, I'm not going to go into all of them, but mentalism this is an interesting pointer. Mentalism at the very top is the first. Then you have correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender is the 7th one. And I'm going to relate these 2 quantum principles, consciousness, to mentalism, and complementarity to gender. And I'm going to explain a little bit about my reasoning for why we would relate complementarity to gender specifically as opposed to something like polarity, which, we could hypothesize that as well. Now, another symbol in addition to the caduceus, with the 7 levels, which relates to the 7 Hermetic Principles, another symbol that is often used in alchemy is the Ouroboros, which is the serpent that bites its own tail. And you can align the 7 principles around it clockwise like this, and you wind up having gender and mentalism connecting, like the alpha and the omega, the head and the tail of the serpent. And so it's interesting that it starts and it ends, at this junction of these 2 principles. And in alchemy, there is actually a cosmology that talks about from the one, creation story that talks about from the one mind. The one mind acts upon the prima materia, the first matter, the firmaments, or they also talk about it as the one thing, right? So the one mind, which is divine, is eternal, is universal, sends out this thought or this stimulus, this idea to act upon the one thing. The one thing is the oneness of all materia, the prima. And that one thing, as the one mind acts upon that one thing, it splits it into 2. It splits it. In alchemy, they talk about the volatile and the fixed, expansion and contraction. In Kabbalah, we call it force and form, or we could say masculine and feminine. So right here, you have this principle of gender come in as the very next thing that comes from the mind of the all, or from that mentalism. So in the creation process, this principle of gender is actually second. First, you have the mind or the mentalism, then you have gender. And we need these principles of masculine and feminine, expansion, contraction, volatile and fixed, to be the generative mechanism through which all other things are created, are manifested. And so this is, again, consciousness and complementarity, the very first principles of creation. Now, I want to come back for a moment to the quantum phenomenon, to complementarity. Now, in physics, we have something called zero-point motion. So zero-point motion is where you have a particle in a vacuum at absolute zero temperature, right? So like imagine out in space, in the middle of nowhere, there's no like zero temperature, 0 Kelvin is sort of the scale that they use in physics, in astrophysics. And in this vacuum in space at absolute zero temperature, you have this particle, and classical physics would say it should be exactly at rest. You should know that it is zero position, or you know exactly its position, and you should know that it has no momentum because there's no thermal energy or anything for it to be moving. But quantum physics says there is some uncertainty. So it might be zero momentum, there is no energy there, but there is some movement. There's some uncertainty in its position, and they call this zero-point motion. So in that zero-point motion, I call it the quantum wobble. You have vibration that comes out from that quantum wobble. And this is the origin of vibration itself. So even in the vacuum, even in absolute zero temperature, you know, zero anything in space other than that little particle of an electron or light or whatever it may be, there's vibration. And in that vibration now, we have a quantum vibrational energy. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Emoto. He was the one who, you know, had the thoughts and showed how they affected water, and then he did the water crystals and showed how beautiful thoughts affected the water crystals and made them very symmetric and beautiful, whereas negative thoughts made them very disharmonious. What Dr. Emoto was actually trying to do was study something that was called Hado, in the Japanese term Hado, H-A-D-O. And Hado, it's like this vibrational essence of a thing. And he was using water to be a medium that would receive that vibrational essence of us, our minds, and then reflect it back to us through the crystallization. But what he was more interested in was Hado. And Hado is this quantum vibrational essence. Now, he thought maybe it's atomic vibration, right? That you have the electrons always moving around the nucleus, and it creates this energy and this vibration that comes out from the atoms. But I would say Hado, that vibrational essence, goes all the way down to the quantum. So this brings in that Hermetic principle of vibration. Everything vibrates, everything moves, nothing is still within the physical. So where is that still point? Where can we really reach stillness? If everything in the physical moves, you always have the in and out, the ebb and the flow, the expansion, the contraction, the vibration. Where is the still point? Yeah.
Between the in-breath and the out-breath.
We might think so. We might think so. But even if you hold your breath, there's still tension. Like, take a deep breath right now.
So I would not think it, but feel it.
But
So this is a feeling rather than
the stillness,
Yeah.
stillness, I would say, is a background upon which it's like the blank canvas upon which all physical phenomena, it's like the quantum field, and even beyond the quantum field is where stillness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a gateway into the one.
Exactly.
But that's the point that I make.
Yes.
Which exists there, right there.
Yeah.
Because we know that circular breathings like digipares, they go through ecstatic states, which is what
they go through ecstatic states, which is what the dig is all about, where they actually move into that point of coherence between left and right hemispheres, frontal lobe, back lobe, etc. And they feel the axis mundi absolutely crystallized within their being. But it's a space of vibrational potential of such richness that one feels in relation to the perceptual reality of everything that exists.
So I would say they're in that state of total coherence.
Yeah.
That then gives them access to that
Yeah.
portal.
Yeah.
That quantum portal.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Beautiful.
So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I love the parallels. So we're getting into the physics of how it works now. And so I want to also explain a little bit. So beyond quantum vibrational energy, what is quantum, right? What is the quantum itself? Now, quantum means discrete, that there are discrete events. So instead of continuous, it's discrete. All quantum events are discrete. There is a gap in between the quantum events. So if you were to imagine a line, when I mean discrete, right? You imagine a line. Well, in the quantum reality, a line is not a continuous thing. It is a bunch of dots spaced really close together. And if you were to draw a line on a piece of paper and then you took a microscope to that paper and you went deeper and more magnified, you would see that indeed it's a bunch of little dots really close together, that there is a discrete reality there. So it's within the gap. So one way to explain this also is when an atom is excited, right? So you have the electron orbiting around an atom, and that electron is in its, let's say, its ground state. It's in its lowest energy state. So it's closest to the nucleus. And when you bring in a photon of the right amount of energy, it will excite that atom to what they call a higher orbital state, which is further out from the nucleus. But when it goes from the lower state to the higher state, you don't see it make the transition. It's not a continuous, like, oh, I'm going to go up there now. No, it disappears and then it reappears in the new orbital. So in that jump, that's what they call a quantum leap. It's jumping, it's discrete, it's not continuous. So where did it go? Where did the electron go? It went into the quantum field. And then another electron appeared out of the quantum field in the new state. So that where it went, that is the gap. That is the quantum gap, the quantum realm, right? The portal into the quantum realm from this classical or physical kind of manifested reality into that place where all possibility is. And another thing to think about is that when the electron is excited into that higher orbital state, there's more space, more empty space in between the nucleus and the electron. So that empty space is where the quantum realm is contained, is in the emptiness, in the gap. So when it comes to accessing the quantum realm, you need to focus on the gap, not the objects, not the events, but the space between. So rather than, seeing this object and that object, we look at the empty space between. Rather than thinking about the event of the time of that event and the time of that event, you think about the in-between. The silence between the sounds, the pause between the breaths. So that is our way of transitioning to focusing on the gap, to accessing that quantum state. So when it comes to this quantum field, you can think of it like ones and zeros, a basic binary that is discrete. It's on or it's off. It's a particle or it's in the quantum realm. And so the zeros are like the 0-point field. And that 0-point field of the quantum realm is what we want to be accessing. And to get there is stillness, is the key. But to get to stillness, we have to also have coherence, right? And so again, bringing your awareness to the stillness between the movements, the space between the objects, the silence between the sounds, and the pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. And when you focus on that, it expands. When you bring your attention and your awareness to that, what you focus on expands. And so we shift from being focused on the physical to then opening up to being aware of the metaphysical. And so the only place that true stillness exists is not within the physical, it's within the metaphysical. True stillness is in the spirit. It is in the one mind, where all is one. Not dual, but one. And so the only place where we can truly access that stillness is within our connection to the one mind. And pure beingness, pure state of awareness. Now, when I say awareness, it's one metaphor is to think of yourself, you're coming out of a sleep state into a waking state, but your eyes are still closed. You're aware that you are. You're aware that you're awake. You're aware at some level that there's something around you, but your eyes are closed. And only when you open your eyes do you then perceive what is around you. Do you observe what? And that is where I would make a distinction between awareness and consciousness. Awareness, pure awareness, is like eyes closed, but awake. Whereas consciousness is eyes open and observing, perceiving, choosing, judging, right? Having thoughts about things and so forth. But this consciousness is also still primary. It's even before the physical. And then it observes from the quantum potentialities to then manifest things into the physical. So this is really the key to that quantum awareness, is accessing that state of stillness by connecting to the one mind, by going even beyond the quantum realm, because the quantum realm is also a sea of boiling potential. You know, it's constantly in possibility and it's all churning over within the quantum field. So within that metaphysical, within the one mind, I'm kind of a little lost on what slide I'm on here. We have this ability to connect to it. So can I get a time check?
Yeah, we've got 28 minutes.
28 minutes, all right. I would love to give you an experience here with a meditation. And so these 3 keys to accessing quantum awareness of stillness, coherence, and then choice, right? And choice is how we then select out of the many possibilities of the quantum field and bring it into manifestation. So we need to ultimately create this quantum coherence. Now, I want to help lead you through a process that is working from accessing quantum coherence first, and then we're going to flow that coherence into the rest of our being so that we can establish a total coherence. Now, to begin, I'm going to just invite you to find 2 objects in the room and look at them with your eyes open, right? So you have 2 objects somewhere in front of you so that you can also then just easily shift into a relaxed state within your body, right? You want to be able to have your body in a position where you're going to move into a meditation. So if you want to uncross your legs, just have your hands open, and then look at these 2 objects somewhere in front of you. And look at the space now between the objects. Bring your focus and your attention to the space between the objects. Relax. Allow your breathing to become rhythmic as you begin to tune in to the space between. Focusing your attention on that gap. Keeping your eyes open. And let it become as though that space is becoming out of focus. Relax your mind. Relax your eyes. as you simply connect to the space between the objects. And as you look at that space between the objects, I wonder if you can now find a space between your third eye and that point that you've been looking at. Find another space in between you and that original point that you were looking at. And now bring your attention to that space in between. Become aware of the distance and the expansiveness as the space just floats there. And then bring it in closer again by finding another point between that space and you. And take notice of how perhaps the eyes begin to refocus on that point in space that is closer to yourself. And then bring it in closer still until you're focusing on a point of empty space right in front of your face. And as you focus on that point right in front of your space, just simply bow your head slightly, just far enough so that you can touch your third eye to that point of empty space in front of you, while remaining calm, relaxed, and comfortable. Calm and relaxed. And if you've not already done so, you can allow your eyes to close and simply relax, as there's nothing else to do other than to be here in the now. And just forget about anything that happened before you came into this room, and pay no attention to what may or may not happen after you leave. Letting go of the outside world. And as you sit comfortably in your chair, I wonder if you can even imagine that the internal eyelid of your mind's eye is gently closing. Gently closing, slowly closing out the outside world and allowing you to go deeper inside. Connect to the gap. Be one with the gap. You may have thoughts, but you are not your thoughts. You may have feelings, but you are not your feelings. You may have emotions, but you are not your emotions. You may have ego, but you are certainly not your ego. Just allow yourself to enjoy the now here with me. Just be content to listen to the sound of my voice and to the silence between the words. For just a moment or two. And I wonder, what would that be like? To be able to step inside a moment. What would that look like? What would that sound like? What would that feel like? To be encased inside a moment. To slow down the hands of time. Long enough to be able to step inside the time and space that exists between the seconds. Between the swing of the pendulum. Slowing it down. Gently, calmly, peacefully enjoying the stillness beyond. Allowing your entire body to relax. Your mind to relax. Your entire being to surrender. Floating beautifully in stillness and silence. Allow yourself to surrender to a higher wisdom, a certain connectedness, the authenticity of your heart, the unshakable and trusted feeling of your gut. A certain knowingness that streams in with clarity. These are energetic signatures and signals from the quantum field. And I wonder if you are already aware that you are part of the connected oneness. That you, me, everybody, and everything are connected. The atoms that make up your entire being are entangled with the atoms that make up the universe in which we live, and the multiverse beyond. The space between the nucleus of every atom and the electrons is akin to the space between the planets and stars of our galaxy. Space. Space. the space in between. Silence. Stillness. No thingness, yet all things. Infinite potentiality. The quantum realm. Focus all your conscious and unconscious attention on the stillness. The stillness that exists within the gap is in fact the portal between all dimensions, between all frequencies, between all universes, between all realities. See the gap forever expanding. And as it expands, it's as though a doorway swings open to a sea of limitless potentiality, limitless resources. The answers to all things. For this is the mind of the all, a state of pure awareness. In the quiet of your mind, that doorway, that portal is expanding, becoming bigger and bigger, big enough that you can step inside the mind of the all. So go ahead, step inside. And I wonder if you're already aware that pure intention and observation play an integral role in manifestation from the plenum. So step into that oneness with pure intention. And be happy to be there as an observer. Allow yourself to float. Out into the infinite quantum realm, in the mind of the all. And in this state of connection to the oneness, ask, how can I be the change I want to see in this world? How can I implement those changes? How can I become an active game changer to contribute a positive shift in the collective consciousness? And if by chance the one mind is connected with yours, then perhaps this revelation is part of your purpose. And connect again to that stillness of quantum coherence. And now allow that coherence to flow into the biophoton field of your DNA. To resonate it into that vibration of this newfound purpose or revelation. And ask your DNA, is this aligned with my blueprints? When you sense that resonance, your DNA expands and opens up to let in this quantum coherence. And then see and feel that new energy being transmitted at the speed of light to the network of DNA in every cell of your body. And now allow this coherence to flow into the neurons of your gut. Breathe this new energy deeply into the gut. And simply ask the neurons of the gut, does this newfound purpose feel aligned with the essence of me? And just take note of the response. When you sense that resonance, feel the relaxation and expansion as the neurons of the gut accept this new energy in. And then allow that energy to be transmitted up the vagus nerve to the neurons of the heart. Breathe this new energy into the secret chambers of your heart. And ask the neurons of your heart to bring forth the truth of your soul and confirm that this is something that you can accept to the very core of your being. When you feel the warmth and the joy in your heart, and all the neurons of your heart in agreement. Allow that positive energy to ascend into your brain. Breathing it in. Allow the neurons of your brain to resonate with this quantum coherence. And ask the neurons of your brain, are they in agreement with the DNA, with the neurons of the gut, the neurons of the heart, and the truth of your soul? And when all of the parts are resonating with this quantum coherence and revelation, allow it to flow through your nervous system, updating and upregulating all the internal programs and neural wiring, and every cell of your body in order to integrate this new energy and any changes necessary that will resonate with your new reality. And when you're ready, you can take a deep breath, open your eyes, returning to the here and now in this room. Let there be light. So I had to move through that a little bit of a faster pace than I normally would. But I'll be curious to hear after the talk how you experienced that space between, what it felt like to you, whether you felt like you accessed it. Even if just for a moment, if we tap into it, we can access vast potential energy within that 0 point field, within that quantum field. And you can then flow that energy into your life, and it will fuel you. 6 seconds in the gap can fuel you for an entire week with flow and resonance. And there's more that I don't have time for because I think I'm, 2 minutes? 2 minutes, okay, great. So from the inner to the outer, when we can achieve this state of inner coherence from the quantum level, our DNA, our gut, our heart, our brain, everything resonating together, all in that total coherence, then we can flow it out into our outer world. We can start to be that change. As the inner, so the outer. But it's not just about resonating, it's also about doing. What are we doing to help bring that shift about into the outer? And we can work with the macro. We from the micro are connected to the macro, the universe, right? We can influence the universe and we can contribute to a collective shift. Now, when we as individuals can accomplish this state of total coherence and integrate it into our lives through simple practices, like what we've just explored, simple practices in our daily lives integrated, starts to flow that coherence into every day. It becomes a way of life. And that is the kind of coherence we need at a critical mass level to create that shift in consciousness in the collective. So when we come and achieve that within ourselves, and then we come together in a group, and each individual in that group is also able to achieve that coherence, there's an entrainment effect, but there's also a resonance effect, an amplification of that field of coherence. And as we as a group can achieve that amplification and send it out, we have even more impact on the collective. Now, this is something that mystery schools, ancient shamanic traditions have done through their temples, their ceremonies, their prayers. We've lost a lot of it, but we're rediscovering it in our intention experiments and so forth. But the key is to create it also at a critical mass level so that we can create that shift in collective consciousness. And there's so much more that I could, of course, share, but I see that my time is up. And so I just want to invite you to become an active participant in creating that shift in collective consciousness. And I'm inspired by Stuart's gift to give the books away. So I'm also going to share for free a book with each of you that I have written on the 7 stages of alchemy and the shift in collective that we are going through at this time. So thank you very much, and namaste.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you, Dr. Theresa. Another absolutely fantastic presentation. So we have a 30-minute break before we have our final talk of the day for us here in London. I know in LA you are on a different schedule, but we're going to be hearing from Lynn McTaggart, who is going to be talking about the incredible power of 8. So enjoy your break. We will see you back at the top of the hour, which is 7 p.m. UK BST. Thank you all. And thank you again. That was wonderful.